I started out innovating in a bank, and I won't go into that detail, and yes, in South America, but that was not innovating, that was surviving. And I kid you not, it was surviving. I started innovating when I went to a startup, to SRI International and a startup company in Silicon Valley. But what happened is over time, the projects I did went from, the very first project I did was with Philips, and we had a 386, and we had artificial intelligence. We flew over to Holland. We had some great beers at the Amstel Hotel, which these young folks here will soon be sent by Howard to Holland to taste again, right? Howard's sending you pretty soon, right?
That's right.
Yes, great.
I got tickets.
Went to the Amstel to do this thing. But what happened over time is that eventually the projects that I worked on became bigger and bigger, and the clients began to say, I have all these moving parts, how do I organize? How do I organize them to get this innovation done? So here's the quick background. I've got a bunch of business degree background from a long time ago. I have 5 years working in banking, and I did actually a whole bunch of investment management, and I did some VC in the 80s. I was part of a team that raised about $25 million for an AI company that Neil Jacobstein, who's now, knew about. So he was at Technology when we were at Mad Computers, okay. I did a bunch of consulting at SRI International, Capgemini, and then I did 4 startup companies. And got a whole ton of stock options, didn't quite make it, did okay, et cetera. And then for 20 years, what I've been doing is organizing the alliances, and the things that my customers keep asking me is they say, how do we organize? How do we organize? Thank you for bringing me into, so Gary would say, thanks for bringing me in on this facilities deal. How am I going to organize these HVAC folks with the Windows folks, with the water folks? Because I only have so much money and time, and I want an integrated output that reduces energy by 20%, right? Serious, real issue. So thank you for bringing me the right partners. How are you gonna organize it? And I'm paying you money, and you better deliver to me the right organizing solution. That's what this is all about. So here's the question. Can I just throw that? What is the best way to organize innovation to get resources? Is it actually, Howard, what do you think? Is it to give the individual innovator, get them a lab and sort of leave them alone? Or
in my case, yeah.
but this is actually why I'm actually asking, because in your case, that would actually be true. I've seen you. And when you're left alone with 2 to 3 people, you're just like, you can just generate and produce, okay? Or is it to actually leave you alone in a university? Anyone here still working in universities? Okay. What about a small team, a lab or a company? I mean, so Gary, what do you think if you actually were told in the context of your company again to organize something, innovate, what for you would be the right way to do it?
I think a small team would be an essential starting point, or at least an initial starting point. Small rather than large.
Okay.
You know, the first bite of the elephant.
So the gentleman in the back with the really nice, crisp shirt, I don't know your name. What's your name? Yeah.
Joel Jameson.
Joel. For you, what would be, what's your experience about the best way to try to organize? Or you've got a variety of experiences. Have you got one you say, this is really one that's worked for you?
I'm some of a mad scientist working by myself.
Okay. But that,
And frankly, that works.
it works, right. Okay. Ed. No, James. Sorry. What about for you? What organizing approaches have worked for you to really accelerate innovation, really make it work?
For me, it's talk to a lot of people in different fields, get the perspectives on it,
Okay.
and then see what they don't see, what they do, and what each other sees.
Okay. So is it kind of a little bit like go out to a community, get a lot of stuff, pull it together, and then bring it in? Okay. Vitali, what about for you? So you're telling me you're now advisor to what, 3 to 4 companies, right? You're working on another thing to go in an incubator. What for you has generally worked?
What's generally worked? It's always different.
Great. And then why is it always different?
Because you have to work with the dynamics of the team.
Okay. So it's whatever the dynamics of the team are, okay? And then how do you go about judging? How do you go about looking at those dynamics and saying, here's how I'm going to make some judgments about how to adjust to the dynamics?
Elasticity measurement.
Elasticity. Okay, this is critical. Elasticity measurement, right? What do you mean by that?
You have to find out who you're dealing with and how flexible they are. Because I believe flexibility is a secret to success.
Okay. So you do an assessment and find out their flexibility, right?
Yeah. It's always organic. You have to get to know people and go from there.
Okay. Feature that drives how we organize to innovate. That's the concept. Okay. And it's actually optimized when we organize a balanced 4 elements. So it's a little bit, the concept vitality is a little bit similar to what you just articulated. Okay. That in human nature, and I'm going to actually go through Darwin, our brain, the debate between Aristotle, the modernists, the natural scientists, all of that, that there are 4 basic, very strong human motivations driven, imprinted in us all the way over time and actualized through our brain, which is the same way that we synthesize stuff to innovate. Same place that we synthesize it. So in the same organ up here through which we heavily innovate, it's also wired in a way to have us do 4 things. A lot of individual actualization, but also a desire to engage with a group. Natural competition, but also wired into us a natural cooperation. And so what I'm guessing is the innovation sweet spot is as close as you can get to the balance as possible, which means you have to first judge where you're starting from, assess it, find out how flexible you are at moving across there, and then figure out how to organize your resources. And as I've started to apply this, this has worked for me, and it's actually worked for my clients, and they said we applied it and it worked. We reorganized the teams, we cut the money, reorganized the resources, and we actually got the technical papers and people stopped fighting. So I kind of go, good, you got what you wanted. You got your technical papers, you submitted them for standards and guidelines and certification, you got what you wanted. So, the first part of this is what I call sort of the innovation layer. First, anybody have any questions about this? Is this kind of like obvious to everybody? Is it obvious to Howard?
No. What 2 thoughts that are orthogonal to everything that came before, which is really the way I think innovation happens. It's not in the garage. It has to do with insights that are compelling enough to cause spontaneous leadership to occur. A person sees something that nobody else has seen. Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, all right.
But what's been lacking on these prior slides, which I think is the single reason innovation ever happens, is leadership. So I don't think insight is generally a groupthink thing, and I don't think that innovators generally ask permission. I think they have an insight and they go. So they start out as the mad scientists like Joe and me, but if they gather enough momentum, people start to follow. And then there's a company, and then there's an organization, and then things happen. So I think, and I think also you and your successes in your businesses, even though you're defining this as a process, I think one of the reasons you're successful is you are a leader. And you come into these situations, and they may not have thought that they hired a leader, but then a leader shut up, and voila, things start to happen. So my question has to do is, how does leadership fit into this thing?
Actually, I have that later.
Okay.
Okay, so here's something, here's my opening construct, and I just created this, but I also think a lot of us think this way. Human beings, we observe a bunch of stuff, we take it in, we see it, and we could take in something that said, there's an animal, we see it, and we heard a sound called a moo. We classify it by some inherent qualities. It's a cow. We can connect the data, and it becomes information. Cow, guess what? Cow is connected somehow with manure. Okay? And then we understand something. Guess what? Cause and effect connections. We notice more manure, more green in the ground. And finally, we have an insight. Aha! If we structure the cow and the manure and we act on it, we can use the cause and effects in a novel approach. Voila, an innovation. Okay? And we can use manure for sustainable growing. So everybody, believe it or not, that's ever been a farmer knows you use manure for sustainable growing. Sue and I are now working on projects in sustainability, and I'll honestly tell you that we have seen individuals say, I've had this phenomenal insight. Manure causes things to grow. And you go, got it, incredible. But for them, it was an insight. For them, it was an insight, okay?
They thought milk came from the supermarket.
Okay, so here's the deal. If that latter makes sense, then how do we behave? How do we think, behave, and act? And it's this act key. You can act to follow, you can act to lead, there's a bunch of stuff you can do. And that is when we intake, what are our senses we intake with? How do we classify? How do we connect? How do we understand why, and how and why do we draw cause and effect reasoning? So Howard, how can sound-centric computing happen? What is the cause and effect that will let it happen?
Somebody will have to do it
Okay.
without asking permission. They'll just have to do it.
But haven't you told me that you understand something unique about the phase structure of sound, right? That you can break it down and organize it in a manner that phase structure can directly translate into computational input capabilities, right? Right? But you've explained that to me, and then I kind of go, oh my God, you understand this stuff. Because you understand the phase structure, you understand the basic elements of the sound, you understand the phase structure pieces, you understand all of this, and you have an insight why you can put it together and how you can act on it. You've had a number of these insights about how to create the sound-centric computer. Is that right? Okay. So here's the next piece that's going on here. We're going backwards. Let's go forward. Let's innovate and go forward. Okay, so if it's human behavior, let's go back a couple thousand years. So, who was an Aristotle student here? Okay. What was Aristotle's big pitch? Well, what was Aristotle's recognition for his body of thought for the Greeks? Does he have several major recognitions for his body of thought?
Yeah, several.
Ken?
I mean, one is political systems and how they work and go.
Right. Human systems, right.
Yeah.
Humans are political animals, right.
Which comes out of his thinking and his research on happiness,
Exactly.
right? Which is what makes a person happy, is because partly who they are. Human beings have social character, so we're happier if we're in social relations. We call it virtue. And then we're also happy if we are creative and doing something new or doing something well. So that was his two major insights into happiness and what drives people.
And what drives them? What drives their behavior? And part of what he was thinking about is there a fixed collective behavior or is it individual? And eventually he said, it's kind of inherently fixed, it's pretty collective, but we don't understand it yet. Yeah, Vitaly.
Was it he or Plato said there's no original thoughts?
I don't think those were words, but since I've been rereading this a lot the last 2 weeks, the answer would be yes. Okay? There's another era after that was theological, where they basically said, look, human behavior is inherently fixed, and it varies by individual, good and bad. Anybody?